The morning haze at JFK, New York, clung to the tarmac like forgotten regrets from a long life. Staff Sergeant Zara Wilkins moved through Terminal 4 with the quiet precision of someone who'd learned to navigate invisible barriers. At 35, her dark skin gleamed under the fluorescent lights, her hair pulled into a tight regulation bun, her olive-drab duffel bag slung over her shoulder like an old friend. She was a black woman in a world that often saw her as an afterthought, expert in aircraft mechanics and electronic warfare, descendant of the legendary Tuskegee Airmen, but still just support staff to some. Her ticket read, Economy, Row 28B. No expectations beyond that, but the gate agent's scanner beeped oddly, printing a new slip. Complimentary upgrade to first class, seat 2A. Zara's eyes widened slightly, genuine surprise. Thank you, she said softly, settling into the leather seat that smelled of privilege and faint citrus. That's when the shock hit. Across the aisle, two white Air Force officers, Major Vance Harlan and Captain Reed Colton, eyed her with disdain. What the hell is she doing here? Vance muttered, loud enough to carry. Black support clerk, thinking she belongs with real warriors. Diversity hire, probably. Reed snorted, bumped ahead of those who earned it. Zara felt the stares, the whispers rippling like turbulence. But she didn't react. Instead, she touched the eagle tattoo hidden on her back, whispering a secret Morse code under her breath. ... Like the eagle, I rise. What did that code mean? What was she hiding? Her wound ran deep, losing her father, Sergeant Zara Wilkins, in a World War II sabotage fueled by racial prejudice. She'd carried that scar through Afghanistan deployments, fixing jets under fire, always proving herself in shadows. But a glance from the cockpit door changed everything. A piercing look from Captain Theo Langford, the SEAL pilot. What did he see in her? Zara sank into the narrow economy seat after her humiliating escort back, the officer's smirks burning like afterimages. The flight attendant had apologized profusely, her voice laced with uncomfortable duty. Ma'am, there's been an error. Please return to 28B. Vance had stage whispered, some people can't tell the difference between janitors and leaders. Reed chuckled into his pre-flight drink, ice clinking like judgment. Around her in economy, passengers avoided eye contact, piecing together the narrative from overheard barbs. Zara folded her hands in her lap, staring out the tiny window at the New York skyline shrinking as the plane taxied. The officer's mockery spread like whispers through the cabin, painting her as an intruder in a world where her skills were invisible. But internally, a short flashback pulled her back. Her father, Leroy, in his Tuskegee Airmen uniform, teaching her Morse code by a flickering lantern in their Harlem home. This is your secret weapon, Zara, he'd said, his voice steady despite the scars of prejudice. Signals in the dark, rise above the noise like the eagle we are. She shook it off, opening a worn book on Tuskegee history to steady her mind. Mystery deepened when she glanced forward during boarding. Captain Theo Langford stood in the galley, his silver pilot wings gleaming, but above them, a gold seal trident pin caught the light. His eyes met hers strangely. Recognition? Assessment? It unsettled her, like a coded message she couldn't yet decode, hinting at connections beyond the ordinary. The plane lifted off, engines humming steadily at first, but Zara's trained senses caught it. A faint, acrid tang in the recirculated air, buried under coffee and cabin smells. Overheated wiring. Then a subtle vibration in the left engine, masked by the drone, like a whisper building to a scream. In her mind, she explained it as she had to rookies in Afghanistan. Machines whisper before failure. Listen for the stutter, the hesitation. It's electronic warfare basics. Interference feeding false data, turning systems against themselves. Is this sign random, or something more sinister? The adventure called, pulling her from invisibility. But would she answer? Zara remained silent as the plane leveled at cruising altitude, her face a mask of composure honed from years in male-dominated motor pools and hangars. Internally, she fought a storm, almost reacting to the officer's taunts, her fists clenching briefly before discipline. Her greatest strength held her back. Why fight words from men who've never turned a wrench under enemy fire, she thought. But the humiliation sat heavy, a stone in her chest, echoing the prejudices that had shadowed her career, from whispered doubts in basic training to outright dismissals in deployment briefings. Reed leaned back, his voice carrying over the hum like poison. Problem with today's military: too many paper pushers like her. Black women in uniform thinking they belong in the fight. They get handouts while real warriors earn their stripes. It caused outrage in nearby seats. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably, murmuring under their breath, but no one spoke up. The words stung like fresh wounds, reopening her scar. Leroy's death in Bubble Y2, sabotaged by racist superiors who dismissed Tuskegee pilots as experiments gone wrong. She'd refused promotions to stay in the shadows, fixing systems that kept others aloft, but now doubt crept in. Was she refusing her own call to rise? Mr. Harold Jenkins, a white veteran in his 70s sitting nearby, leaned over with light comfort. "Don't let him get to you, miss. I served in Korea, saw plenty like them, spouting hate to feel big. My buddy lost his life because of that kind of blindness, but men like your Tuskegee kind? They turned the tide. You look like you've got stories worth hearing. Hang in there." His kind eyes reminded her of allies past, easing the isolation slightly, like a bridge across generations. Zara analyzed the growing vibration mentally, like electronic warfare under fire in Afghanistan. She'd hacked enemy signals mid-mission, rerouting jammed comms while bullets whizzed overhead. Here, the plane's whispers spoke of stress, turbine hesitation, electrical strain building like a storm. "It's not turbulence," she murmured to herself. "Systems fighting something unseen, interference masking the real problem." She closed her eyes, feigning sleep, old habits from military transports where vigilance meant survival. Why intervene? Let the real warriors handle it. Yet, the eagle tattoo itched on her back, a reminder of Leroy's words, pulling at her resolve. The secret from the tattoo will force her to act. The plane droned on, but the adventure refused to let her refuse. As the flight stretched over the Atlantic, Zara's mind wandered to her mentor. The memory of Father Leroy, vivid in a flashback that pulled her into the past. In their modest Harlem home during her childhood, the room smelled of oil and old books. Leroy, still scarred from WW II, sat her on his knee by an old radio set. His hands, calloused from fixing P-51 Mustangs for the Tuskegee Airmen, guided hers over wires and tools. "This is aircraft repair, Zara," he'd say, demonstrating how to diagnose engine stress with a simple tap. "Feel the vibration. It's the plane talking to you. But Morse code, that's your secret weapon against the noise." Dot-dash rhythms filled the air as he taught her to signal through static, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes from that fateful mission. "Like the eagle, I rise," his personal mantra, inked on his arm before sabotage by racist superiors clipped his wings forever. "They saw us as threats, not brothers in arms," he'd whisper, instilling in her the quiet fire to face unseen battles and soar despite the chains. Harold Jenkins, sensing her turmoil from his earlier words of comfort, leaned closer and shared Tuskegee stories that bridged the gap between them. "My uncle flew with the Red Tails. They saved his bomber over Europe more times than I can count. Those men faced prejudice that would ground lesser souls, but they rose above it, proving their worth in the skies where it mattered most. You remind me of that spirit, miss. Don't let today's echoes dim your light." His encouragement wove generations together, turning a stranger's kindness into a mentor's echo, reminding her that allies could appear in unexpected places, forging bonds stronger than steel. But the incident is about to explode, and Theo knows something. This meeting reignited her fire. Leroy's lessons weren't just faded history. They were living tools for the chaos ahead. The plane's whispers grew louder, vibrations humming like coded warnings. But with her mentor's voices echoing in her heart, she felt ready to listen and act. The incident began subtly, crossing Zara into the unknown. Thin gray smoke seeped from overhead vents, carrying that bitter electrical smell now spreading like an invisible threat. Lights flickered, not once, but in pulses that made passengers glance up uneasily, hearts skipping with unspoken fear. Zara recognized sabotage immediately, but misdirection clouded it. Could be weather-related strain from that storm building on the horizon, she thought, beating back her own rising panic to stay sharp. Panic spread like wildfire through the cabin. A child cried sharply, clutching a parent's arm. Drinks sloshed onto trays as the plane dipped slightly. The officers in first class, once smug and superior, now barked demands at the flight attendants with voices cracked by fear. "What's happening? Turn this bird around, now!" Vance shouted, his earlier authority stripped away, face pale as he gripped his armrest. Reed joined in. "This is a disaster. Why aren't we descending?" Their whispers of mockery had turned to desperate pleas, exposing the fragility beneath their prejudice, a sweet reversal that hung in the air like justice deferred. Zara's pulse steadied. Combat training kicked in, slowing time as it had in dusty Afghan hangars under rocket fire. She cataloged the symptoms methodically. Uneven engine tone on the left, a subtle delay in the aircraft's responses to air currents, hydraulics groaning faintly like a warning. This wasn't random failure. It was deliberate interference, like the electronic warfare she'd mastered in hostile skies, jamming signals to confuse systems, turning machines against themselves. The fuselage shuddered harder, overhead bins rattling softly, as if the aircraft itself was pleading for someone to listen. Around her, the cabin air thickened with tension, passengers exchanging wide-eyed looks. "Is that smoke?" someone asked in a high-pitched voice, the acrid scent now unmistakable, seeping into every breath and amplifying the dread. In that moment, calm under pressure became her lifeline, a life value forged in battles where hesitation meant loss. The intercom crackled to life with the captain's calm but urgent tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a technical issue. Please remain seated." But before he could finish, the cockpit door swung open. Captain Theo Langford emerged, his weathered face scanning the cabin with controlled urgency. Not tall, but his presence widened the narrow aisle, uniform crisp despite the stress. His eyes swept past the panicking officers, locking on Zara with precision. "Staff Sergeant Wilkins," he called, voice cutting through chaos like a command in battle. Panic froze the cabin. Why does he know her name? Whispers halted, eyes turned to the quiet black woman in economy. The officers gaped, their earlier mockery silenced by this unexpected turn. She rose, stepping into the aisle, her duffel bag left behind. Heart pounding, but steps steady, she crossed the threshold from humiliated passenger to potential savior. The curtain between classes parted like a veil, and as she moved forward, the plane's groans seemed to echo her resolve. The adventure had begun, no turning back. Zara stepped into the cockpit, the door clicking shut behind her like a seal on fate. The space was cramped and chaotic, warning lights pulsing red and amber across the panels, alarms competing in shrill tones designed to demand attention. The air was thick with heat, and that acrid electrical tang, now unmistakable as systems strained beyond limits. Captain Theo Langford slid back into the left seat, his first officer glancing up with a mix of skepticism and desperation. "Strap in, Staff Sergeant," Theo said, his voice clipped but steady. "We've got cascading failures, autopilot dead, left engine rough, hydraulics bleeding. Checklists aren't cutting it." Tests mounted immediately, the plane bucking through turbulence that felt like physical assaults from the storm raging outside. Lightning forked across the dark Atlantic, illuminating the cockpit in brief electric blue flashes, while thunder rumbled like distant artillery. The external conflict intensified, the storm's fury slamming against the airframe, winds shearing at the wings, forcing the aircraft to fight for stability. Engine stutter grew more pronounced, a cough in the left turbine that Zara felt in her bones, like the desperate gasps of a wounded machine. Alleys emerged in the midst of the chaos. From the cabin, Harold's voice carried through the intercom as he rallied passengers, spreading encouragement like a veteran calming green troops. "Folks, that woman's one of us. Military through and through. She's got this. We've seen her type turn tides before." His words filtered into the cockpit via an open channel, a bridge of support that bolstered Zara's focus, reminding her of the generations connected by shared resilience. Enemies solidified their opposition. Vance, having followed her forward in a fit of indignation, blocked the doorway briefly, his face flushed with a mix of fear and fury. "This is insane. You're letting a support clerk play hero?" Reed, hovering behind, doubted loudly. "What can a black woman do in here? Probably just diversity window dressing." Their racist terms fueled outrage, echoing the prejudices that had grounded Tuskegee pilots and now threatened to undermine the crisis response. But Zara pushed through, her resilience a quiet force, drawing on Leroy's mantra to rise above the noise. Multi-layered conflict pressed in. The external storm howled, shaking the plane like a predator. The group dynamics crackled with tension, Vance and Reed's doubts clashing against Theo's authority. Internally, doubt nagged at Zara. Could she really decode this under pressure? She leaned forward, eyes scanning the flickering displays. The lights pulsed in irregular patterns, not random but like a signal buried in static. "It's interference," she said, her voice cutting through the alarms. Education layered in, like jamming radars in electronic warfare. Spot the false echo, reroute the truth. These patterns in the lights, they're Morse code anomalies, subtle sabotage masking as failure. Theo nodded sharply. "Decode it." Zara's fingers danced over a secondary console, her mind racing back to Afghanistan missions where she'd unraveled enemy jams mid-firefight. Dot-dash sequences emerged from the flicker, a hidden loop feeding false data to the engines. "Got it. Crossfeed valve stuck, bleeding pressure. Reroute to auxiliary now, or we lose control." The planes stuttered harder, turbulence slamming them against restraints, but her resilience pushed through the outrage, turning racist barbs into fuel. Harold's encouragement echoed faintly, allies rallying as passengers began chanting soft support, a sweet counter to the venom. What is Vance's past? The tests wore on, pace increasing as the storm closed in, but Zara's hands stayed steady, unraveling the layers one signal at a time. The plane lost control gradually, hydraulics groaning in protest as pressure bled out, warnings blaring like a chorus of impending doom. The airframe shuddered violently, dipping through air pockets that felt like freefall. The storm outside amplifying every jolt. Zara braced in the jump seat, her hands gripping the harness, as the cockpit transformed into a battlefield of flashing indicators and desperate adjustments. Theo wrestled the controls, his knuckles white, while the first officer cycled through backups that failed one by one. "We're losing rudder response," he muttered, sweat beading on his brow. "If we don't stabilize, this storm will tear us apart." Internal turmoil hit Zara like a wave, pulling her into a flashback of Leroy's death that made the barriers feel insurmountable. She saw him in her mind's eye, suited up for a WO2 mission over Europe, his Tuskegee squadron dismissed as colored experiments by white superiors who sabotaged their fuel lines out of prejudice. "They left us to fall," Leroy had written in a letter she'd memorized. His words a haunting echo of history repeating. Abandoned midair because black pilots weren't worth the risk, he plummeted into the sea, wings clipped by hate. The memory clawed at her, near collapse under the weight of doubt. Was she destined to fail the same way? Her expertise ignored in this metal cage 30,000 feet up? Conflict escalated as Reed, having shoved his way to the cockpit door, revealed his jealousy toward Tuskegee in a venomous outburst. "This is what happens when you let quotas fly the plane. My grandfather lost promotions to those experiments. History repeats with people like you meddling where you don't belong." His words dripped with outrage, a raw admission of inherited bias that fueled the tension, making the cave's darkness feel absolute. Vance nodded in agreement, his face twisted, their combined prejudice a barrier as harsh as the failing systems. The barriers seemed insurmountable. The plane's near collapse mirrored her inner turmoil, history repeating in Reed's jealousy. The storm's fury a physical wall. Groans from the hydraulics served as a warning. Education in the language of machines. That sound means pressure loss, Zara thought, recalling Leroy's lessons on listening to aircraft stress. It's the plane crying for help before it breaks. But in the depths of this cave, a code echoed like a reminder. Like the eagle, I rise. Leroy's mantra pulsed in her mind, a sweet resolve cutting through the outrage, urging her to push past the prejudice and failures of the past. Zara enters the cockpit, but the sabotage secret is about to explode. Barriers pressed in, the plane tilting dangerously, but Leroy's voice and her own resilience whispered that collapse wasn't inevitable, not if she rose to meet it. Theo called Zara forward, his command slicing through the cockpit's din like a blade through fog. "Staff Sergeant Wilkins, your expertise is what we need now," he said, gesturing to the jump seat as the plane lurched again. The twist landed like a thunderclap. "I know you through the manifest, and Leroy's history. He was my father's wingman in World War II, one of the Tuskegee Red Tails who saved their squadron more times than history records. Your name jumped out. His legacy runs in your veins." Shock rippled through Zara, her breath catching. How could this stranger know her father's story, the sabotage that claimed him? It was as if the past had reached out, pulling her deeper into the ordeal. The ordeal unfolded in the cramped cockpit, alarms pulsing red like angry heartbeats, the storm outside battering the windows with rain that streaked like tears. Zara leaned over the consoles, her eyes scanning the chaotic displays, hydraulic pressure fluctuating wildly, engine temperature spiking, autopilot system dark. "This is cascading failure," she said, voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her edges. "But it's not natural. Wire cuts, deliberate, feeding interference into the sensors." Education wove in as she worked. It's electronic warfare tactics. Cut the lines to create false data loops like jamming radars in Afghanistan. The system thinks it's overheating when it's actually a bleed in the crossfeed valve. Reroute to auxiliary circuits, cross-reference the backup sensors to bypass the jam. Misdirection clouded the moment at first. Zara's mind flicked to Reed, his jealousy toward Tuskegee, a motive that fit the sabotage profile. His outbursts hinting at a personal grudge. But as she traced the wire cuts on a secondary panel, Vance burst into the cockpit, his face contorted in rage. The culprit revealed himself in a fury. "You can't do this, letting her touch anything. It's an insult." His family link to World War II racist sabotage against Tuskegee emerged in his rant, a twisted legacy of superiors who had clipped wings out of hate, just like those who doomed Leroy. "My grandfather was right. They don't belong in the skies." Outrage exploded as Vance resisted, lunging forward with a racist snarl. "You'll never belong here, you or your kind." Spittle flew, his hands grasping at the console to stop her, threatening to unravel everything in a fit of inherited bigotry. The cockpit became a microcosm of multi-layered climax, life and death hanging on frayed wires, the storm's fury external, Vance's hate internal, the plane's screams mechanical. Zara dodged his grasp, her body moving on instinct from combat drills, but the lunge knocked a tool loose, sparking a fresh alarm as pressure dropped further. The aircraft tilted sharply, passenger screams filtering through the door, Harold's voice among them trying to calm the chaos. Under pressure, Zara repaired, her hands steady as she rerouted the hydraulics. Isolate the bleed, feed through the auxiliary line, compensate for the jam by manual cross-reference. Detailed logic guided her. Electronic warfare demands you outthink the interference, trace the false signal back, seal the cut with a bypass patch. Theo followed her leads, adjusting throttles as the engine smoothed from stutter to hum. Sweet relief came as the plane stabilized, the alarms fading to intermittent beeps, Harold's applaud echoing from the cabin like a chorus of validation, passengers joining in faint cheers that pierced the storm. But the landing still has challenges. Survival hung by threads, the ordeal a forge that tested her to the core. But Zara had risen, turning sabotage into salvation. The plane touched down in Reykjavik, amid sheets of driving rain, the landing rough but triumphant. A controlled crash that brought 200 souls safely to solid ground. Tires screeched on the wet tarmac, smoke pouring from brakes as the aircraft shuddered to a halt, engines whining down to silence. For a moment, only the drum of rain against the fuselage filled the air, a cleansing rhythm washing away the terror. Then, applause erupted from the cabin, sobs mixing with laughter, passengers embracing in relief that felt like rebirth. Theo unbuckled first, turning to Zara with a nod of profound respect. He came to attention and rendered a crisp salute, the gesture cutting through the aftermath like a signal flare. "Staff Sergeant Wilkins," he said, his voice carrying the weight of shared history. "That was your doing as much as mine." The twist revealed itself as he reached into his pocket, handing over a worn family badge, Leroy's insignia from his Tuskegee days. "I saved him once in World War II, barely pulling him from a sabotage dive over Europe. He gave this to my father as thanks. Now it's yours." His legacy lives on. What did the family badge mean? It was more than metal. It was validation, a bridge across time honoring the Tuskegee Airmen who flew against prejudice, their resilience educating generations about the cost of equality in the skies. Officers stood ashamed in the background. Vance arrested by ground crew for his sabotage, cuffs clicking like final judgment, his face a mask of defeated hate. Reed, changed by the ordeal, approached with lowered eyes. "I was wrong," he murmured, his voice stripped of arrogance. "You belong more than any of us." Sweet applause swelled again, passengers clapping with fervor, Harold leading the cheer from economy. "That's our hero." Zara seized her recognition. the humiliated passenger from row 28B, transformed into the savior who turned crisis into legend, her quiet strength a testament to rising above. But the road back still holds unexpected challenges. In that sweet triumph, the salute humanistic and shareable, Zara felt the weight lift, Tuskegee legacy alive in her hands. Ready for whatever lay ahead. Sabotage investigation unfolded on the rain-soaked tarmac in Reykjavik, emergency lights strobing across the scarred Airbus like beacons in the storm. Ground crews swarmed, documenting the wire cuts and interference patterns Zara had exposed, their reports already hinting at a deeper network of prejudice within the ranks. Bureaucracy loomed as the first unexpected challenge, officials questioning her role with clipped skepticism. A passenger mechanic? Protocol doesn't cover this. How do we know it's not a coincidence? Vance, in cuffs, sneered from the sidelines, his arrest a hollow victory amid the red tape that threatened to bury her contributions. But Zara pressed on, resilience her anchor, drawing from the fire reignited in the cockpit. As the rain mixed with her tears, she pulled Leroy's old letter from her duffel bag, the paper worn but words eternal. "Rise, my eagle," he had written before his final flight, "even when they clip your wings with hate, the skies are yours if you claim them." The humanistic read was emotional, the quality's afterglow washing over her, the letter a bridge from World War II sabotage to this modern echo, reminding her that change started with one voice refusing to be silenced. Small twist came as Reed approached, his face etched with genuine remorse. "You changed me," he said, voice low but steady. "Saw my own prejudice in that cockpit. Grandfather's stories were lies to justify hate. I'm sorry, you earned this more than any of us." The apology was sweet, a crack in the armor of inherited bias, leading Zara to nod, not in forgiveness, but acknowledgement. It was a step toward system change, her report already outlining reforms to honor legacies like Tuskegee, ensuring no one was grounded by hate again. Challenges lingered, the bureaucracy's questions probing like lingering storm gusts, but Zara pressed on, letter tucked close, ready for the resurrection ahead. Zara publicly reveals the tattoo, but the sabotage is a modern prejudice network. In the equality afterglow, she walked toward the terminal, the badge heavy in her pocket, resilience carrying her home. Zara stood on the tarmac as the investigation wrapped, the rain easing to a drizzle that mirrored the lifting fog in her mind. With ground crew and passengers gathered, she publicly revealed the eagle tattoo on her back, rolling up her sleeve to show the inked Morse code beneath. "This is my father's mantra," she said, her voice steady and resonant, decoding the dots and dashes for all to hear. "Like the eagle, I rise." The twist exploded like a final thunderclap. The sabotage wasn't just Vance's act. It was part of a modern prejudice network, a web of inherited bias woven through military ranks, linking his family's World War II sabotage against Tuskegee to today's subtle barriers that grounded diverse voices before they could fly. What is the prejudice network? The question hung in the air as Zara exposed it, her report laying bare the connections. Anonymous tips, tampered manifests, and whispered campaigns designed to undermine diversity hires like her. It defeated not just Vance, now in custody, but the system itself, a victory that honored the Tuskegee legacy, ensuring reforms would clip the wings of hate once and for all. Reed, standing nearby, nodded in silent agreement, his change a testament to the ripple effect. Humanistic and public, the share of her rise message rippled through the crowd. We all carry codes from our past, signals of strength or chains of prejudice. Choose to rise, to decode the noise, and claim the skies. It was equality education in action, reminding everyone, from senior officials to young crew members, that resilience wasn't solitary. It was a collective flight against the storms of bias. The IDA action peaked in that moment, desire for change igniting as her report was signed off, promising military-wide audits and training to uproot the network. In this resurrection, prejudice lay defeated. Not merely a man, but the shadows that had haunted generations. Zara felt Leroy's spirit soar with her, the badge in her pocket a beacon for the future. Zara flew back to America, the badge pinned close to her heart like a talisman, carrying the elixir of hard-won truth. In the quiet of her home, she transmitted, "Like the eagle I rise," to the next generation, mentoring young black aviators at a community center in Harlem. "This isn't just code," she'd tell them, decoding Morse patterns on an old radio set much like Leroy's. It's our heritage, rising above the storms of prejudice, claiming skies that were denied to our forebears. Their eyes lit with possibility, reflecting the resilience that turned sabotage into stories of strength. Equality's flame passed from Tuskegee wings to modern dreams. Reflection settled in as she walked familiar streets, the weight of the ordeal lifting like morning mist. Equality wasn't a distant ideal, it was forged in moments like these, defeating not just one man's hate, but a network that echoed across decades. Resilience, she realized, was communal, a shared soar where one person's rise lifted all. The Tuskegee legacy educated her anew. Black pilots who defied gravity and bigotry, proving that wings were earned through unyielding spirit, not granted by privilege. In an open ending, Zara paused by a park, watching an eagle soar overhead, its silhouette cutting through the clouds. Ready for the future, she knew challenges would come, but so would the strength to meet them. Have you risen like the eagle? Share your story of overcoming prejudice in the comments or with loved ones. Your voice might be the elixir someone needs to claim their skies.